An M4 platform with a 9mm magazine seems to be the hot trend these days. G&G had released their exquisite looking ARP9, Classic Army, then followed up with a very similar looking and appropriately named Nemesis X9, and then out of nowhere, Ares decided to step out of the shadows with their very own, also very similar looking M45XS, except with a collapsible stock instead. I mean, it's just another M4-ish, right? Anyway, out of the three, we're going to take a closer look at the Classic Army Nemesis X9, just to see whether if it's just another M4 with a 9mm conversion, or if it's in a league of its own. First of all, the X9 looks fantastic. This bronze edition has a great texture, which makes it look a little glossy under the right light, which, to be honest, I don't mind. The X9 may be compact, but this lump of metal is a little heavier than you expected. Imagine somebody handing you their baby, which I know for a fact that you airsofters treat your guns like babies, and don't lie, you never know how it's going to first handle, especially if it's a little on the heavier side. Don't say that about somebody's baby. The next step, one would normally rest it against their shoulder and take a few shots, but I like to start off with flicking a few of the switches. It's all about the little things in the end. As I go from semi to one pew and then to many pews with noticeable clicks, it's very satisfying. A sexy looking flat trigger and a very light pull, reminiscent of the Ares Amoeba series. A 7 out of 10 looking charging handle, which will then reveal the rotary hop-up inside the breech and the American flag on the flap, where the stars lead the way. Then you can sharply click the bolt release, which is probably the least likable clicky noise out of a lot. You can also access the motor inside the grip by pulling on this tab, much convenient though. Now for some other clicky noises. The X9 features a flip-up adjustable front and rear sight, which I'll probably remove and put on another red dot that sits on top of this top rail. At the front, we have a mildly aggressive looking M-lock rail, the same way a Chihuahua is aggressive when it reveals its teeth and eyeballs that could potentially fall out of its skull at any moment. And then there's the hideously colored amplifier at front. Put an orange cone on a Chihuahua and it's funny, but those yaps are really loud, and so is this. The PTW stock can be extended to a second and final position, which is far more comfortable to shoulder, or else you'll end up looking like this guy in the American Assassins poster, where it seems as if your eyebrows are what's lining up with the sights. It's also much easier to then remove the stock tube cap, which then reveals the compartment where there's plenty of room for a candy bar shaped battery. That is connected to a Tamiya connector. Now Matt finds this cap a little bit too flimsy, as it likes to pop out for no particular reason, especially if you're the aggressive type of player that spends more time crawling in the mud like an earthworm rather than standing around aimlessly. Speaking of which, I think it's time to stop being a hermit and to step outside to the great outdoors. So we are in our first game. Right now, I'm putting my hands up because I'm currently walking to spawn as the game is currently going on. And we're going to test out what the X9 is really like. Now, the bad thing about this is that I really despise that orange tip, as you can see here. But aside from that, oh, it's rather gooey. This one will actually do pretty well in this kind of scenario. One big team against the other big team, they have to try to take the trenches, but that's besides the point. This is all about the X9 right here. Now before we start, I should actually talk about the trigger system. There's an electronic control system, the ECS, inside the gearbox that will allow it to change from what is currently semi to 3-round burst to, say, semi to 5, semi to full auto, 3-round to full auto, 5-round to full auto, and such. You can choose that by switching to semi, holding the trigger down till it beeps, and then pick and choose whichever you want. But unfortunately, since we're mid-game, I am not going to do that. I'm going to stick to what we currently have, which is semi 3-round burst. the trigger is very reactive. And I'm currently using 0.3 gram BBs and hitting targets about 40 meters away. This thing is like magic. All right, let's move on. This is to be expected since Airsoft has come so far of late. I'm just glad Classic Army have opted to go for a 120 round mid-cap magazine with the high and low caps to follow. Right. The bad thing about only having 2 magazines is that in a game like this, you run out of BBs very quickly. However, this is not the end of the world, since I am sure future owners of the X9 will make large purchases of the magazines to accommodate their playstyle, whether it be in larger or smaller games. But is the ECS and all of its perks enough to give it a step up from the ARP9? I'm afraid not. They're pretty much identical to each other, and much like their M4 counterparts, it seems like the two will be competitors for the longest time. I guess it just comes down to whether you like the ARP9 more, or its Nemesis. Whichever one you choose, you're better off sticking to CQB style games. Now Matt finds this cap a little flimsy at times, as it likes to pop out for no particular reason, especially if you're the aggressive Now Matt finds this cap a little bit flimsy at times, as it likes to pop out for no particular reason, especially if you're the aggressive type of player. Now Matt finds this cap a little bit flimsy, and it likes to pop out for no particular reason, especially if you're the aggressive type of player that spends more time